Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Polly, for that beautiful prayer and choir. That peppy song just made me so happy to be here. Overwhelmingly in the Gospels, Jesus talked about two things. First, he talked about the kingdom of God. He said, the kingdom of God is not a place in some distant galaxy that waits for a future time. No, he said, the kingdom of God is very near. The kingdom of God is within you and among you. It is as close as your heartbeat, nearer than the air you breathe. God's kingdom is your inner world. I think of the kingdom of God as the good life, that place of balance and peace and justice in which an enlightened person awakens to the divine presence within and lives out that presence, expresses that identity with passion and devotion. But next to the kingdom of God, the topic that Jesus talked about most was money. Did you know that? 1 out of every 10 verses in the Gospels has something to do with money. In large part, then, Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, and he talked about money. It's almost as if one had a lot to do with the other, that our relationship with money has tremendous impact on our ability to access the life that really is life, to live into the kingdom of God, which we often call the kingdom of God within. Jesus tells so many stories about money. Sometimes he's positive about it, like the widow's mite. Jesus commends the poor widow for giving a small amount. It's a story apparently focused on her generosity and her selflessness. Her small amount was giant compared to what she had. Other times, Jesus is fairly neutral about money. Think of the prodigal son who wastes all of his father's money, but then the father welcomes him back home as if the money didn't matter at all. Jesus spoke about paying taxes, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Then there are the workers in the vineyard who all get paid the same, even though some lost their teleprompter suddenly and are looking just at a blue screen. Should I move to my computer? Talk amongst yourselves for a moment. I'm not kidding. Oh, it's back. Okay. Oh, it's gone. I see Rachel making a mad dash somewhere. In just a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life story related to money. And so as I'm pulling it up, I invite you to think about your own. Okay. Let's go back to the workers in the vineyard. The workers in the vineyard all got paid the same, even though some worked longer than others. The takeaway from that, the last shall be first and the first shall be last, which sounds either like great news or terrible news, depending on where you are in line. Sometimes Jesus is flat out negative about money. He warns over and over not to store up treasures because it might blind you to the truth that the real treasure is living the life that really is life. In Matthew 24, he says, you can't serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. In Luke 12, he says, if you're going to store up things for yourself, then you cannot be rich towards God. That's how things work. But then, in Mark 14, there's the story of the woman with the alabaster jar who washes Jesus' feet with expensive oil. The men ridiculed her for wasting money. Jesus praised her for her faithfulness. Oh, and let's not forget Jesus flipping the money changers table in the temple. That's always a very dramatic story. I mean, there are many, many more stories about money, but you get the idea. By the sheer volume of stories about money in the Gospels, we assume that money mattered to Jesus, that money is an important tool to help people live into the kingdom of God within. Money mattered to Jesus, and money matters to us. Whether we're rich or we're poor, each of us has had a journey in regard to money, a journey with many twists and turns, with challenges and wounds, with times of scarcity and times of abundance and celebration. And through all of those experiences, each has developed our unique way of thinking about and handling money. In my home growing up, I remember that money was an almost constant tension. My dad had a good job for many years, but when I was in 5th grade, my dad lost his job, and money became very tight for many, many, many years in our family. My parents worked hard to provide for me, for my 3 brothers, and I usually had the things that I needed, but it just wasn't easy. We always had food and shelter and clothing, but there was this ominous mounting debt that my parents struggled to pay, a lot of stress around bills. I can remember tense arguments between my parents that I overheard from the other room. For a lot of my childhood, I just remember being afraid about money. Even as I talk about it now, I can feel that anxiety in my body. Whew. It's not something that I talk to anybody about. None of my friends knew. No one at school would have dreamed that money was an issue in our family to the extent that it was. And I was not about to tell anybody. I was ashamed. I wanted to work as soon as I could and earn money that I could control. So I babysat. I carefully counted my money that I earned, and I put it in a white envelope. I started reading the classified ads in the newspaper for jobs, I think when I was 14 years old. I found a few possibilities, but nothing that was feasible. On the day I turned 16, I got my driver's license. With my age and my ability to drive, the job market opened up for me. I got a job as a waitress at Dusty's Ranch House. It's a coffee shop in Arlington, Texas, where I grew up. And I loved my job. I had a little brown polyester uniform, I'll have you know. And I remember once this very nice lady left me a $5 bill as a tip for being such a good waitress. I still remember walking up to bust the table with that little, that gray tub that you have, and seeing that tip, and she wrote a little note of appreciation and said I was a very good waitress. I would cash my checks and keep track of my money. I don't think I saved much of it. I did not give any of it away. I spent it all on the things that I'd struggled to do before, to go out to eat or to the movies with my friends, to buy things here and there. I mean, it was almost 50 years ago, and I worked at a coffee shop where, let's just say, most people did not tip $5. But I felt empowered with the money that I earned. Those experiences, even though they were so long ago, are still there inside of me. They continue to impact my behavior. Like whenever any kid is selling something to raise money for school or for a trip, I will buy it. Come to me. I'm also a big tipper. I do my part to dispel the myth that women are poor tippers. Another thing, I enjoy counting money. Every Monday, Kurt comes in and he and Rachel set up in the office and they count the money from the day before. I would love to do that job. Really, I would. Adding up the checks, sorting out the bills, lining up the president's faces, counting the change. I am all about that. I love money. Finding our way to the good life, to the life that really is life, means being mindful, knowing ourselves, understanding the things that lead us to destruction, as well as the things that lead us to peace. And chances are money is tied up in there somehow for most of us. Most of us, at least, I would say. Our attitudes toward money can be a barrier, or it can be a gateway to that narrow path of happiness and fulfillment. What are your life experiences related to money? Take a moment to think about that. How have your experiences shaped your relationship with money? Yes, for as much as Jesus talked about money, it's hard to draw a central message. But in all of the stories he told, there is this thread of continuity. He seemed to say that money doesn't mean anything good unless it's shared. It's actually a basic lesson from nature. If I hoard more food than I can eat while leaving you with none, then you'll have gone hungry, and eventually the food I stored will rot, leaving me hungry. It's overall a bad deal. That's what Jesus taught, that material wealth is no good unless it is shared. Most of the people in this sanctuary and worshiping on the live stream are wealthy. I mean, literally wealthy by global standards. Most of us have access to shelter, food, clothing, shoes, some form of transportation, either a car or a friend who will drive us. We have the opportunity to pursue education if we wish to. We have these things in varying degrees. But there's one thing that we all share, one thing we have in common, and that is the wealth of this community. By being engaged in a church, we're doing something countercultural here. Being part of a church is a way of practicing among a small group of people over a significant period of time. We're practicing what we would like the world to be like. I believe so deeply in what we're doing here. I see it every week as I talk to folks. We're healing ourselves, and we're doing our part to heal the world in small ways and in big ways. This time of year, most churches are busy planning and preparing for what ministry will look like in the coming year. Money, budget, this is a part of that discussion. And it's an important part, too, because a church's budget may be the truest reflection of its values. Sometimes people get really awkward when talking about money in church, especially progressive churches. We don't want to be perceived as heavy-handed. But money is an essential element to our common life to our community, to the ways that we feel called by God. I've been asked, in every church I've served, including this one, I've been asked at this time of year, what are people supposed to pledge in church? Different churches have different norms and practices around giving. Now, I, of course, would never presume to tell anyone what they should give. But I'm going to do something that may be kind of weird and awkward. I'm going to share with you what my wife Lisa and I give to our church. And when you make a gift, you can rest assured that it is held in complete confidence. Nobody knows the details of that except for those who keep the records. But I'm free to discuss the amount of my pledge, and I'm going to do that because I think it's important to talk about things frankly and openly. I'm a transparent person. Particularly, I like to talk about things that might be difficult. As your pastor, I'm asking you to consider a pledge to support our church. And I guess I want you to know that I'm not asking you to do anything that I am unwilling to do myself. So, Lisa and I have pledged $12,000 to the church for 2024. We'll give $1,000 a month. Our pledge for this year was $10,000, and we've been listening to our church leaders who have asked us to consider a 10% increase. So we increased 20% to help make up for others who might not be able to do that. I don't say this to brag. I can imagine that many of you give far more than that. I guess I just want you to know that as your pastor, I give right alongside you. And I do it, Lisa and I do it, because we love this place. And we believe in the work that we're doing here. It's not only where I work, but this is our church. And I just feel so fortunate to serve here. So grateful to walk this journey with you. My giving is an expression of that gratitude. And I also give because I think Sharon Salzberg is right. And I think Jesus was right. There is a connection between generosity and happiness. It enriches my life to support the people and the institutions that I value. So friends, let us give thanks today for our lives, for our stories, all of them, for our wealth, for the challenges that shape us, and for this community of encouragement that makes the world a better place and that can help each one of us awaken to the good life.